get bigger. You're wearing more clothes tonight, so we take up more space. Apology beforehand. I have been fighting this crud, cold, flu, whatever the heck it is, and may have to cough somewhere during this program. So I'm going to apologize if that happens. You'll know what's up. So this evening, tonight, we are going on safari. Which is fun. And we're going to Botswana for an African adventure, not just to see mammals, but also to marvel at Botswana's many colorful birds as well. So after connecting flights to New York City, we then flew nonstop another 15 hours between Newark and Johannesburg, South Africa. Then we spent the night in a hotel right outside the airport, and then the next day we had a short flight on to Moan, which is in Botswana, and it's located where that yellow arrow is down there by the airplane. And just a quick look at Africa there. The light area underneath the airplane is the Kalahari Desert, and of course the Sahara Desert is up in northern Africa. So we're going to be visiting the second largest desert in Africa. Here's our Monteverdi expedition group. Many Wichita Audubon Society faces in this group, and here's our toast to Botswana. And many of these people are here this evening, and at the end of the presentation, when I open it up for questions, we'll pass the questions around, get some questions to the rest of the people. People are familiar with many species of African wildlife, and zoos around the world showcase the what we call the charismatic megafauna, the big animals that we typically see in zoos, all mostly from eastern and southern Africa when we see African species. Many people have never seen hippos in the wild. Interestingly, does anyone say hippopotamuses anymore? And I think everyone knows what they are, but we never call them anything but hippos. When seeing lions and giraffes and hippos and elephants, many of us feel that we're seeing animals that may not really belong in the wild in this world. And unfortunately, they're fighting to exist in a world that today is dominated by humans. Are zoos the only places in the world where some of these animals will exist? Well, the future will tell us, and we really don't know. But for now, 4.5 million people each year visit Africa for tourism. The photo safari tourism business is worth over $12 billion a year, and 63% of all African safaris are bookings that come from the United States. These dollars are why many of these populations of wildlife still exist. Our dollars, tourism dollars, support conservation efforts in Africa. Botswana is a landlocked country with no access to the coast. It's one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world. More than 70% lies within the Kalahari Desert, which is, like I mentioned earlier, the second largest desert in Africa, second only to the Sahara. We took 2 small planes to transport us to camp, and the runways are gravel and soil and sand. And at the runway, we were met by our guides and safari vehicles. Our group traveled in 3 4x4 Toyota Land Cruisers, 4 of us per vehicle. Each seat was built so we could see over the heads of the people in front of us, and each seat had a tray there in front of us for binoculars and cameras and books and sunglasses and water, and very comfortable traveling safari style. When we arrived at Danaka, our first camp, lunch was waiting. To the right was a bar. The people standing in the back there are the serving area, and to the left is a seating area. We stayed at 3 different safari camps when we were there, 3 nights here at Danaka, and 4 nights at each of the next 2 camps. Danaka, Kanana, and Shinde camps are Kura Downy safari camps. And this was our main gathering area at Danaka. And here we are watching baby warthogs sneak up behind Terry Schwab. Actually, those are just metal art pieces. But here's what was behind Terry. This is the water hole. It attracted a really nice parade of visitors. Of course, it was empty sometimes. But here are some of the visitors that would show up out there, oftentimes when we're just seated in the area. There's a herd of zebras along with one foal, and greater kudu. The Kori bustard that we see there is about 4 feet tall, and it's a one of the larger birds that we were to find in Botswana. This warthog may have had the largest tusks of any that we saw, and he or she is with piglets, so may have been a female, was a visitor to that water hole. Wildebeest were fairly common visitors there, and this is the only eland I saw. It's the largest of the antelope species. All of these were at the water hole, and in desert, water holes are extremely important to all of the ungulates that need water, and even the predators have figured that watering holes are good places to go. So they all go there. If there's limited water, everything goes to the water hole. At none of the camps could we roam the grounds freely. Here at Danaka, we were not supposed to ever leave the boardwalks. We were not to walk around the bush, and lions left footprints in the sands most evenings. The group before us found lions that were snoozing on this boardwalk in the middle of the day. And so they told us, don't leave the boardwalks, and they would yell at you if you did. Here's how we roughed it in the African bush. This is camping safari style. A door to the left of the bed here takes us into the bathroom. The door in the back there led to an outdoor shower. There's also an open shower there on the right. The water just drains down through the floor. And they were very comfortable. Here's Bill Langley. He's my roommate studying his bird book on our porch. Each morning we began at 5 a.m. with a wake-up call. Somebody came to the door. We had choice of coffee or juice. At 5:30, a camp person came back to escort us to breakfast in the darkness. At 6 a.m., we left camp after breakfast, and sunrise was in a safari vehicle. So we were on the road. We drove roads like these looking for birds and mammals, and usually we had a tea break at about 10 o'clock, stopped for drinks, snacks, and then went back to the lodge around 11 o'clock for an 11 or 11:30 lunch. And then we had the early afternoon off. We snoozed around the camp until about 4 p.m. And that's when the animals out in the bush were snoozing as well. And then at about 4 o'clock, we took off and went back out. There was always wildlife to see. These are jousting springboks. Here's another water hole fed by a pipe from a well. This is desert and would be dry if not for some supplemental pumping, and for a safari camp that wanted visitors to see wildlife, they pumped a few water holes for us. See the flock of birds in the air over there? These are Burchell's sand grouse that are coming in, and they're nervous birds. They circle and circle and circle and circle and circle, and then they land, and then they drink like crazy, and then they burst off into explosive flight, leaving. Other Kalahari bird, including the guinea fowl, were rather tame around some of the water holes and quite common. Here's another Cory bustard like the one we saw earlier at the camp's water hole. This is the national bird of Botswana. At 4 feet tall, it's a little easier to see than most birds. Mouse birds are typically hard to see in the open like this. They're usually more at home in dense and grassy and brushy tangles, and this is one of the few that actually came out in the open for that portrait. We saw several species of shrikes, and like most shrikes worldwide, and the shrikes we have here in Kansas, they like to hunt for small trees and grassland habitat. We were always confirming identifications, either with books or apps, and even Kevin has to confirm his sightings once in a while. These whites are the showy males. Females are brown with more normal tails. And as you hopefully have figured out now, when I show a new animal, its name always shows up down there. The second photograph that's up may not have the animal name on it. And here's another water hole. This one was active later on in the afternoon. And a couple of the animals that came in while we were at that water hole, here's a jackal, came in for a drink, and we'll see another species of jackal at another camp. And ecologically, they take the place of like coyotes. And here's a greater kudu and red hartebeest. Funny looking guy. In the Kalahari Desert, adult male lions are known for distinctive black hair in the mane. And lions are challenging to get photographs like this, because normally they look like this. Here's Laura soaking up the action in front of us. They generally sleep 16 to 20 hours a day. And even when the safari vehicles come up, we're fortunate if they lift up their head even to look at us. They're immune to being disturbed by safari vehicles. And this is a snoozy young male. His mane is not fully developed, and so you're not seeing the black in the mane. And as soon as I saw that lion, I thought I recognized this guy. I thought, I know this lion. So here we are bushwhacking while looking for one of the rarest and most protected of the species that we saw. They are so protected that they are followed daily by armed guards and vehicles. These are southern white rhinos, and there may be about 17,000 of these left in the world. And any of the safari camps that have rhinos on their property consider it to be a major attraction and something that they guard, either they guard or the government guards to avoid poachers from coming in. These are southern white rhinos. The last male northern white rhino died in Sudan in 2018. So that guy is gone. For reasons, again, poaching of their horns. And to reduce poaching, these animals have had their horns bobbed to make them a little bit less desirable for ornamental carvings and for folk medicines. And the horns are made of keratin like fingernails, so they continually grow, which means that periodically these guys have to be tranquilized and the horns bobbed off again to keep people from shooting them and taking their horns. Each day at sunset, we would all come together and have snacks and drinks. And by the time we got back to camp, a campfire typically was ready for us. Free drinks of all kinds, alcoholic drinks, and any sort of a cola or a lemonade, or just they had all sorts of things there. And then we typically had entertainment. Look at the spotlight in the background. So the spotlight was constant vigilance for leopards and lions, even for all the camp folks. And then our evening dinners were full of laughters and story of the day and what did we see and what you didn't see, because we were in 3 different vehicles and we didn't all see the same things all the time. And no peanut butter sandwiches ever served at these places. This moth was attracted to the bread, and we were all naturalists. We're excited that he came to visit. We all took photographs, and then, of course, we ate the bread. The next morning at Danaka, this leopard visited the water hole and visited us while we were having breakfast, and then we were off to Kanana camp in the Okavango Delta. The Okavango River comes from Angola, further north after their rainy season, and the water may take 4 months to 6 months, depending on the amount of rainfall that they have up in Angola. And then it spreads out in this unique alluvial fan that never reaches the ocean, never drains into another river. It goes there, and it is a dry land alluvial fan. Many species of water birds gather here to breed when the water levels are their highest. And so this occurs in Botswana during Botswana's dry season. So here's their dry season. Floodwaters from the north come in, flood it, the birds gather. This is a place for breeding, and over a few months, nearly all of the water then will evaporate. From the air, the delta looks like this during the dry season. We were there right at that period where it could have been wet or it could have been dry. And in this particular camp, it was still dry. Game trails are pretty easily seen. We were there at the very end of the dry season, and they were expecting the floods to arrive any time. This Okavango Delta is a World Heritage Site and home to 22 globally threatened or endangered species of birds and 14 threatened and endangered species of mammals. Going to Kanana, we could all fit into one plane. This was our plane and our new camp and our new guides. At all of the camps, they had small pools that you could take a refreshing swim in that mid-afternoon portion of the day. Some of our group in this pool were visited by a family of warthogs that showed up between the fence and the edge of the pool while they were in the pool. So I'm not sure who was watching who the most, but I wasn't in the pool at that time, but it was kind of cool. This tent to the left is the toilet. The main lodge is to the right. One evening, a hippo grazed in the darkness between the lodge and the toilet. And some guy went out to the toilet and come running back in, and all that staff had to run out, chase the hippo off so he could go back to the toilet. I hope he still needed to go after that. Kanana is a really gorgeous lodge. It's a circular lodge that circles a large fig tree right in the center. You can see the base of that tree there. And I love these open lodges that they had there. They were just fabulous places to hang out, although we were on the go quite a bit. Different parts of the lodge are connected by boardwalks. Here we are halfway around the circular lodge, still looking in towards the central fig tree. Gorgeous designs. And here's our dining area at this particular lodge. This is the tent that Bill Langley and I was staying in. And the Marlette's tent is to the right, just out of sight behind this log over here. One evening after a day afield, an elephant had managed to get into the compound and was grazing behind that log to the right. They had to run him out so we could get back to our tents. Check out the path. The path is made with chipped elephant dung. So elephant dung comes out like big grass biscuits. And the staff would go out and collect these things, and then to keep the mud off of the trails and stuff, it was odorless. It looked like it was coarse grass that was quite soft on the trail itself. So here's our tent with the savanna behind it. We saw baboons and elephants and zebras and impalas and wildebeests in the savanna behind our porch here. And another gorgeous tent camp. And it's safari time, so out in the vehicles we go. 2 male ostriches are black and white, and 4 females are brown and white. African buffalo are generally regarded as one of the more dangerous and cantankerous animals in the bush. Impala is the most abundant animal in Botswana, and in impala herds, typically the females outnumber the males about 2 to 1. Seebies have way too many S's and E's in their names. Makes it hard to pronounce. They have a reputation as being the fastest antelope on the plains of Africa, capable of reaching speeds of over 60 miles an hour. And Jim Marlette pointed out to me that red leechwees, if you look up how you pronounce that thing, you see it in several different ways. The leechwees always look like they're walking downhill, he told me. And once he told me that, I was like, you're right, they do look like they're walking downhill. Their hindquarters are higher than its front shoulders. They're almost always found around water, often wading up into their bellies. And they live in separate male and female herds, unlike a lot of antelopes. And like prairie chickens, they breed and display in leks, where males get together and they display and battle and they establish dominance. And females then will enter, and she may select the mate on the lek and then breed on the lek, which I did not know there were mammals that displayed on leks like that. So without the seasonal floods yet, the concentrated water also concentrated the wildlife. So that was kind of good for us, because we go to where water was, we're almost always going to find wildlife there. So here comes the elephant, single file. Many people think elephants are one of the smartest animals, and they are constantly learning. That day, little Ethan would learn 2 valuable lessons: how elephants spread seeds and contribute to a diverse and healthy environment, and why he should never follow his mother too closely. So lilac-breasted rollers are one of Botswana's most abundant and widespread species, and are one of favorite birds to photograph because they are so colorful. And these are southern brown hornbills, or turkey-sized birds. They eat insects and mice and bird nestlings, lizards, snakes, toads, spiders, and about anything alive that they can swallow. And these are both storks. The yellow eye on the saddle bill to the left tells us that this is a female. The male will have a dark eye. And the open bill uses its heavy and unique bill for crushing and extracting freshwater mussels from their shells. All the bumps out there in the water are hippos. Hippos spend their days in the water and come out to graze at night. And their skin is somewhat sensitive to the sun. They're also pretty curious. Hippos are dangerous animals and are reputed to kill more people than any other mammal, and you don't want to be in a boat amid excited hippos. It's not a good place to be. Saddle-billed storks, that's a male and a female there behind the hippos. And look what we found near our T-spot that day. We found a hippo skull. So very cool. And the Marlets have a cool tradition of having their feet photographed in every country they visit. And so everywhere we go, you see them off holding their feet out there, taking a picture of their feet against something or another. So here they got their feet in the hippo's mouth. So some people spend their time taking selfies, and the Marlets spend their time taking footsies. So Patty and Melinda, despite trying, could not put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And Humpty Hippo was missing a few parts there, but we got him sort of laid out the way he might have sort of once been. What a great way to be spoiled watching wildlife and bird life in Africa. Hammerkots are odd birds. These guys only stand about 2 feet tall. They build huge nests that may weigh 50 to 100 pounds. They're the size of a bald eagle nest here. The nest may be 5 feet tall and 6 feet wide, and they're hollow, and the inside of the chamber walls are plastered with mud. So they really make an elaborate structure that lasts for years. So a very elaborate nest for these birds. This bird gets its names from its call. Go away. It's a vegetarian. It feeds on leaves and shoots and fruit and flowers. All these different types of birds feed on different things. Africa is full of strange birds and wildlife. This African harrier hawk has a very small head, and he climbs around in trees looking in cracks and hiding spots for lizards and birds and small mammals. That's what he finds to eat. This black-collared barbet is using its massive beak to create a nesting cavity, much like a woodpecker would create a hole, and it actually belongs to the same group of birds as the woodpeckers, but its closest relative appears to be toucans. So it's a close relative to toucans. And in Africa, I get a kick out of seeing birds that are totally different from anything we find back home. So cursors are birds, shorebirds, unlike our plovers and sandpipers, and they're not found on wetlands as much as desert and semi-arid plains, sort of like upland sandpipers and perhaps even killdeers. This is a large female Burroughs eagle owl. Here in Kansas, the great horned owl females can reach extremes, may reach 4 pounds in weight, and this bird, a female, can reach about 7 pounds. So we're talking about a bird that's nearly twice the size of a great horned owl in weight. So a bush lunch at Kanana. While having lunch here, we overlooked grazing blue wildebeest. Plain zebras came by, impalas, and again, red leachways. Baboons are a type of monkey that have long dog-like muzzles. And they also have kinks in their tails. And they live in troops. If you see one, you typically may see as many as 10 to a couple hundred individuals in those troops. Vervets are monkeys. They're smaller, and they lack the dog-like muzzles of baboons. And they're major predators. Since they are smaller, are cats and eagles, and even occasionally baboons will catch them and eat them. The rarest animal we saw in Botswana was a pack of 10 African wild dogs. And to many of us, that was a real highlight to see these, because a lot of people have trouble finding these animals. They're the rarest and most endangered wild carnivore in Africa, and the second most endangered canid in the world. The most endangered is the Ethiopian wolf. This is number 2. There may be about 600 of them left in Botswana, and at the most, perhaps 5,000 left in the world. In our country, kingfishers are found near water, and we expect them to primarily eat fish. These two Botswana kingfishers are woodland birds, and they spend their time eating large insects. All 7 species of bee eaters in Botswana are brightly colored with down-curved bills, and they eat a variety of insects, but true to their names, they specialize in eating bees and wasps and other things. This swallowtail bee eater is in the process of eating a wandering donkey acrea. What a crazy name for a butterfly. Sunset, drinks, and snacks in Kanana, and on to Shindy Camp in the morning. Getting to Shindy Camp involves another flight over the Okavango Delta. We're now seeing more water in the Delta. To show you where we're heading, you can see there Kanana Camp on the bottom. We're following that blue arrow north to Shindy Camp. And because of the water and the travel is pretty slow, we can jump in a plane and be there within usually 45 minutes to an hour to get to the next camp. So crossing the Delta from Kanana to Shindy and arriving at Shindy Camp. This was my favorite camp of the 3 camps that we were at. This was my favorite. And here we are getting camp instructions at Shindy. And here's a layout overlooking our campfire and the dining ring in front of us. Sheltered dining above and to the left. Another meeting area there upper right, and another table and dining area off to the lower right. Here's the sheltered dining up above, looking out over the wetland. So as a kid, I saw a movie, and I'm curious how many of you saw the movie Swiss Family Robinson. Familiar with the Swiss Family Robinson? So a shipwrecked family got shipwrecked on an island with zebras and ostriches and monkeys and elephants and flamingos and hyenas and even a tiger. And these only would ever occur together in a movie, but that was beside the point. They made this treehouse that was their home, and it was connected with different rooms at different levels, and people got around through this treehouse. And this was my fantasy home. I thought that was the coolest place, and that's a big termite mound there on the right. And behind that termite mound is another little structure over there. That is the group toilet. And this may be my all-time fantasy toilet. That was so cool. This is from the inside looking out. If that were mine, I'd have binoculars and a camera setting there. It is just made for multitasking. So what a magnificent place this camp was. And this was so cool. Different areas, and it was a great place to bird watch as well. Now, take a look at that structure on the right. Clear over there on the far right is Rod laying down in a recliner with his camera up in the air, and he is trying to photograph a paradise flycatcher that was teasing him. And Rod has finally figured out comfortable photography. And I said, go Rod, you got to figure it out over there. So here's some of the birds that Rod is photographing, and the rest of us as well. These are birds that were right there around camp during our noon periods back in camp. So here's a few of the birds around Shindy Camp. All are beautiful and exotic and colorful, even their starlings. Here's 3 species of starlings, quite different from our European starling that we have here, but he's also got some pretty impressive sheen to him. They're all beautiful birds. Babblers skulked around in the shrubs around our tents. A tinker bird made a monotonous little tink, 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 tink call from the shrubbery, and had to work to finally get one out in the open. And here's our tents at Shindy. From our porch here at night, looking out over that area, I saw hippos and wildebeest and jackals and honey badgers using my headlamp at night. So this is, again, safari luxury. So here's the bathroom, shower, and the toilet, and the door there goes to the outside shower. So I wanted to show you what that was like. So every one of these lodges had an outside shower as well. So into the field. There was a little more water at Shinde, and so they used some homemade bridges to get around. And lots of wildlife there as well. Most of the wildlife would just look at us as we drove past. They're kind of used to safari vehicles and used to visitors. In the right light, it was easy to see how blue wildebeest get their name. Water bucks have a distinctive marking on their rump. Nothing's quite like the water bucks. And these were our roads again. At all camps that we visited, we saw lilac-breasted rollers, and it took a while to finally get one with the right light and the right background and the right distance to get the photo and to show off the colors of these birds. Just stupendously colorful birds. And some birds are small, and because of their size, they're easily overlooked. And some birds are large and quite easily seen. I always enjoy, again, seeing the birds that are totally different from species at home. Sunbirds in Africa and Asia take the place of hummingbirds in the Americas, and they're all nectar eaters. They have decurved bills and long tubular tongues for probing flowers, and they're all colorful and just about the size of goldfish. Generally, our most successful outings were the morning sessions from 6:30 departures until 10 a.m. tea time. Midday sun was high and the light was pretty harsh for photography, and the animals liked to head to the shade and lay up, and it was kind of harder to find them as well. So we kind of took siesta as well in the middle part of the day. We saw a lot of zebras. It's mesmerizing to watch a herd of zebras grazing or even running past. Their patterns create kind of a visual puzzle, and their communications of zebras are cool. There are a lot of barking calls and yelps that are unlike horses. It almost sounds like flexing a sheet of metal. Just a very odd call, and they have alarm snorts and they squeal when fighting, so they make quite a bit of noise. Here's that other jackal I mentioned we would see later. These jackals are primarily nocturnal, and the side-striped jackal has a white-tipped tail, which separates him from the others. This guy, we woke up, and he went off to find a more secluded place to finish his nap. And even though spotted hyenas appear dog-like, they're not closely related to dogs at all. They actually belong to their own family, and interestingly, their closest living relatives are cats and mongooses rather than dogs. Human watching is also interesting if you're comfortable and have a snack. And always new things to see. Check out the oxpeckers on this hippo. Oxpeckers specialize in eating ectoparasites like ticks, and they use that compressed to flatten the beak like scissors to scissor off ticks. And these are yellow-billed oxpeckers. Not only hippos, but zebras and giraffes and various antelopes and cattle, they all provide ticks for their lunches. And the mammals seem to appreciate the oxpeckers showing up and working the ticks off of them. They're fairly tolerant of them. Look at that zebra on the left, seems to appreciate what he's doing. So check out the two-colored bill of the yellow-billed and no eye ring, just a red eye. Compare that to the other species. This is the red-billed oxpecker. It has a yellow ring around its red eye and also a solid red bill. Cool birds. Tea time and snacks. And one afternoon, Laura and Melinda learned about basket making, and Laura jumped in to help with the weaving. We also had the opportunity to explore some of the wetlands there that we saw adjacent to the camp. Here's Rod and Laura, ready for some action in our boat. And the African fish eagle is more colorful than our bald eagle here in the U.S. and appears to have a smaller head and longer legs. This guy fascinated me. I kind of wanted to see him before I went. It's called a black heron. And they have a unique way of fishing. They they mantle their wings out over their heads and create this umbrella. And fish will see that dark area, they'll dash underneath it to hide, which means it just brings them closer to their beak and closer to becoming a meal for the bird that's fishing for them. So it's a very unique fishing strategy. So different but similar. This could very easily be a scene from Quivira National Wildlife Refuge with great blue heron, snowy plover, and black-necked stilt, but it's not. Similar species doing similar things on an entirely different continent. Crakes are related to our rails. This guy on the right intrigues me. This is the African pygmy goose. It measures in at about 13 inches, and it is Botswana's smallest duck. And for comparison, it is smaller than our smallest duck, which is the green-winged teal. So this bird is smaller than our green-winged teal. Very tiny little guy. Ancient Egyptians regarded this bird as sacred. It was believed to be the incarnation of Thoth, their god of wisdom and learning. The lack of floodwaters worked to our advantage throughout this trip, concentrating the birds into the available pools. Made it a little bit easier to find. And these birds are waiting again on the floodwaters to begin their nesting season. This beauty was one of my target species I really wanted to see before I went to Botswana. He's showing his extremely large toes, and it's ideal for walking around lily pods. So this is the African hakana, and this is the lesser. And this is the smaller relative, but also same pose and very, very long toes, but about a third the size of the previous bird. So here we are in front of the boat. Rod is surveying papyrus sedge. This is the famed plant from which Egyptians made papyrus paper for their written records. Papyrus is great habitat for kingfishers. These are pied, these are pied kingfishers, and here's my favorite. This is a tiny 5-inch kingfisher called a malachite kingfisher. Stunning little birds. So, a view of Shinde Camp from the wetland. So we're now preparing to leave Botswana with memories of colorful birds that I dreamed of seeing, like the white-fronted bee-eaters and little bee-eaters, and gorgeous birds like the lilac-breasted rollers, and large, iconic mammals, rare animals, memorable landscapes, fun adventures, amazing lodges, amazing, wonderful staff that was at every camp, and memories made with really cool friends, and we were fortunate to travel together. So this is our Botswana African adventure. We got the lights turned back on, and we'll see if anybody has any questions. Everybody's, for all of us that went on the trip, everybody's perspective is a little bit different. And every day when we went out, we made it a point to mix up our vehicles, and so we all traveled with each other on different days and different afternoons and cycled around and would get back to camp. And occasionally, if we saw something really unusual, like the roe eagle owl, we all gathered together because they had communications between the jeeps. But if it wasn't anything, we did that on the African wild dogs too, and we did that with the rhinos. But if it were the more typical stuff, we'd get back and we ended up comparing notes and didn't always see the same things. Any questions? Charlie, I saw your head go up.
Was the delta saline? Is it getting more salty?
No. Well, I didn't notice it. I didn't notice any saltiness to it. I don't think it went through anything like Quivira does, through a salt pan or anything. So it was all fresh water. I don't know of any. There must be some. I don't know of any internal deltas like that anywhere else. Do you guys? So this dumps into a basin, and it took a massive geological event in through history to create the situations where this river never reaches the ocean. So it's kind of bizarre. Yeah.
The eland, was that a bony structure on the back?
The eland, yeah. Jim, was that a bony structure on the back of the eland? They're built almost more like cows than antelope.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, they have a massive shoulder and a hump, almost Brahma-like.
Oh no.
On the eland.
I think it's about like any of those things that have sort of a
Fatty.
Yeah.
There may be a little elongation of the
perhaps like an avulsion or something like that.
But
That was the only one I saw, that one I photographed, and that was during a lunch break, and somebody had just showed up over around the campfire area, and he was on the move out of there. I was kind of surprised we didn't see another one, but I don't remember seeing one anywhere else while we were down there. Any other questions?
I noticed everything looked very open air, but there looked like there were insect nets and things all around. Were there many insects or anything around?
No, and all the information says bring your insect spray or insect repellent stuff, and some people are more attractive to mosquitoes than others, like my wife, but I think I maybe saw 2 or 3 mosquitoes the whole time we were there. Just didn't see them. And I don't know if anybody else was bothered by insects of any types.
That was the same thing. When we were at dinner, the staff would come and turn down the bed and put the mosquito netting around the bed for everybody every night. But I think I saw maybe 1 mosquito the whole time. There was very few.
It looks pretty dry there.
It was, but we didn't really, at Shindy Camp, our last camp, we started to get around water more. But those first 2, now how that differs after the floods come in and all those little pools fill up and all the insects have a chance to breed, and I would guess that later in the season is much more buggy than it was when we were there. But that's a guess because that's what happens in Kansas towards the end of the summer, after Cheyenne Bottoms and Quivira get plenty of water, here come the mosquitoes.
Yes, well that looks like sort of a deserty area there, and it looks like maybe in the dry season you don't have any problem.
It qualifies as a desert because of rainfall.
Yeah.
It doesn't strike us like our North American deserts that are full of succulent plants and cactus and yuccas and a lot of that type. It's just scrubby and grassy areas that reflect the amount of rainfall. And they have their own unique plants and stuff too. Most of our group was probably more into the birds and mammals and reptiles, which we didn't see many reptiles. A few, but not many. And of course, like everywhere you go, birds are the easiest to see because there's more of them. They're active during the day. Mammals can be easy to see in a place like some of these safari camps because they get habituated to people that don't harm them. Now, if that area was openly hunted on a regular basis, the mammals then would be hard to find too. But some of those animals, like the lions, it's like, holy, they really just kind of kick back and they don't care whether you run over them with a vehicle. They just don't move a whole lot. That's exaggerating. They get up and they move about, but they have purpose when they move, not just because people show up. Yes?
So do you have a lot of bird species there that migrate great distances like we have from northern Canada to South America?
Yes, a lot of the birds in Botswana. When we were there, a lot of the birds had already migrated back towards Europe, and there's a certain overlap. Some of us just got back from India in the fall, and there's a little bit of overlap between Africa and India. So the birds from Asia, and not all of them, but some birds from Europe and Asia migrate down through Africa and during the winter months, and then go back north to breed. And there's a few birds there that we have here, birds like great egrets. Some of the shorebirds that we have here are kind of cosmopolitan. Other birds, ospreys and peregrine falcons, and what are some others, Tom? Cattle egrets. And it used to be their cattle egret and our cattle egret were considered the same species, and now there's an eastern cattle egret and a western cattle egret. This time of year, they look pretty much the same to us. If we're there during the breeding season, their cattle egret would have much more orange back up over its head than ours does. So there's subtle difference, but closely related. Carolyn?
In regard to the insects, all of our meals were eaten in open air. We didn't have flies, we didn't have that moth. The one insect I can think of.
That was exciting when the moth showed up.
I mean, with all that animal poo around, you'd think there'd be flies, but they don't seem to have flies.
Yeah.
Outside eating was very delightful.
Yeah. Harry?
Did you keep a bird list?
I did. Tom, Kevin?
I've got 214 on my list.
214?
Yeah.
I think
It's not huge, but it's,
all of us were in about that same range. We all saw about the same number of birds. We didn't all see the same lifers, depending on what our history of travel has been in the different areas.
Quite a few of those found in Kenya.
Oh, yeah. I've been to Tanzania before, and there's some overlap there, but a lot of new stuff too. I mean, you don't have to go too far, and all of a sudden you start running into new species again.
one of the limitations was that, of course, we were confined to the vehicles. We could not get out of the vehicles, so we had to rely on the guides to find the birds. And of course, they're used to finding the bigger birds, those lilac-breasted rovers, but the little tiny birds, not so much. So we had to kind of work for those a little bit.
We challenged these guides. Before we showed up, I told the tour providers, and every time we showed up at a new camp, I reminded them that we want to see the mammals, but I said we want to see the birds too. And we want to see not just the big showy birds, but we want to see the little birds. And I had two of the three camps said that they really enjoyed traveling with us because it pushed their guides. Usually people just want to see elephants and lions and zebras and leopards, and so they kind of enjoyed the challenge of having to look a little harder, and they made a few mistakes that we ferreted out in the more we studied that, and they made a few mistakes, but for the most part they were pretty good. They had good eyes. Other questions? Yes.
I would ask you about the guides. Did they speak Setswana off from the others, or mostly English, or back and forth? How was that?
Well, the guides, most of the people spoke English. Not all. There was a couple of, there were some housekeepers and stuff that didn't have a real good command of English. But I'm sure that being able to speak English and other foreign language is a great asset to getting a job in one of those camps. And they have guides. So the Kerr Downey, we visited 3 camps, and I believe they have 5 camps. So there's 2 of them that we didn't visit it. And the guides typically work one camp area, but they will get shifted around a little bit depending on language. I mean, if we've got a German group coming in and somebody needs to speak German, then they find the guides that speak German. We saw no white staff at any of the camps, which I thought was great.
When they were on the radio with each other, they were always speaking Swahili.
Yes, they were, because they didn't want to, I mean, they had their surprises, that they were saying, hey, we got something over here, and so we'd take off, and we didn't know what we were taking off for, because they weren't going to, there's no guarantee it was going to still be there when we got there, and so it's like, well, it'd be kind of nice to know what these guys are saying sometimes. They all had a magnificent sense of humor. And the camps, we'd come back at night, and they would put on a program, and they would sing, and you would show up at a new camp, and they would sing, and we took up most of the camps, so there were a few other people there. When someone else was leaving the next day, they put on a program for them. They loved to sing, just absolutely loved to sing. And it was all kind of similar to this, but it was just a fun, exotic experience to be there. Very, very, very friendly, very service-oriented people at the camps. So, and Kerr Downey, that's who our tour provider had lined up for us. But if you go to Kerr Downey camps, or contact me later if you want, you can directly contract to go to these camps on your own without any tour groups, and they can set up your own. They'll give you your own guide, and if you go with two couples, it'll be just the four of you and your guide. And so you don't have to go through a major tour company. In fact, Kerr Downey's website makes it quite convenient if somebody wanted to go over with a group of 2 or 4 or 6 or whatever. So it's a pretty nice setup. So it's a little bit different there. Up in the Serengeti, up farther north in Kenya and Tanzania, they have these huge national parks, and all the tour groups go into the national parks. They have to be permitted, but a leopard on a kill, or a cheetah, or something. They're all communicate with radios, and you may find a leopard on a kill in the middle of this donut of safari vehicles, just completely circled. And in Botswana, it's a little different, because in Botswana, what do they call them? They have a concession.
Yeah.
They bid on a concession, and so they bid a government concession. They pay a fee, and only their camp, their safari vehicles, have access to this area. And they stay in those areas most of the time. But where we were, the wild dogs would cross from one concession into another concession. And if they were following wild dogs or something major, and it were to cross over into a concession, they had agreements with each other that you could follow that type of prey onto their property, but only as long as you were with that animal, and only for a little ways, then you had to turn around and go back. And then it was on the other concession. And so they honored those concessions, but they also communicated with those concessions. They knew where the rhinos were and where the rhinos were moving. And they had government people following the rhinos, armed guards with, I don't know what kind of weapons they were, but they were significant for a bunch of us that were loaded only with binoculars and cameras. And so they wanted to make sure that those of us that were e-birding, where you can use coordinates and say, we saw something, they wanted to make sure that we would not tell people where those rhinos were, other than just a general area. And so that was another means that they had to try to protect that resource, which I thought was excellent. So, any other questions?
What time of the year did you go?
We went in March, which was the beginning of the wet season. And so it was hotter earlier. So our trip filled first, in Monteverde Expeditions with Mario Corvetto. He took another group in. They booked it later, but they went right in front of us. And I kept getting these notes from Mario that said, they are just scorching. And they'd go back in the middle of the day and wet towels and wrap them around their heads, and they were just sweating their tails off. We got over there, and it was the most wonderful weather the whole time that we were there. And so if we would have gone much earlier, we would have been there during the hot season, We got there during the rainy season, which is also the beginning of the cooler season. And so their primary tourist period kind of runs from March and April. And if we'd have gone in late April and May, we would have paid more because that's a higher desired traveling period, and so they can get more money and there's less competition. So we kind of bridged that area right before that started. But I thought it worked pretty well. I'd have liked to seen some of the nesting colonies of long-legged waders. They weren't nesting when we were there, but the dryness concentrated them around the water holes, which photographically and seeing them concentrated them a little bit more. So there's pluses and minuses. Some of the bee eaters I wanted to see had already left and gone back to Europe. Carmine bee eaters, rats. Have to find them somewhere else someday. So, how many have been to Africa? Okay. Yeah, it's a fun place, and everybody ought to go. For those of us that are a little concerned of our carbon footprint and what does it mean when we take off and fly around the world, there's ramifications of how we spend our tourist dollars. And I've got to admit that if some of us were not going to places to look at wildlife, to remind people in those countries that their wildlife resource is indeed a valuable resource and is indeed unique and is worth protecting, and that they should protect it, if we showed no interest in it, what's their incentive? If we go over and we spend dollars, American dollars, they make a living off of us, they share their resource, they develop a pride. I think it's a part of the conservation ethic that is very important to people like that in other parts of the world. Thanks for being a real good group. Two things I'll mention real quick. If you do not get my photo blast on these trips and want to get just a little photo summary at the end, all I need is your email address. I've got a pad up here and a pen. If you give me your email address, I'll send you. Most of you get them. The other thing I'll mention is that the book that Pete and I are working on, The Guide to Kansas Birds and Birding Hotspots, 2nd edition, revised and expanded. They should be out in July. Sometime between now and July, everybody that's on the Wichita Audubon Society mailing list, everybody that's on my photo mailing list, you'll get an announcement with a 30% discount code. And I think the book is going to be selling for about $35, which means you can get it for about $25, which is, it's significantly larger, a lot more photographs, and a lot more hot spots of where you might go birding and exploring around the state of Kansas. That will be out in the July, and most likely you'll get an opportunity if you want to pre-order one before then. So coming later sometime. Thanks. And